Join Velvet Bite Radio, where we talk about occult studies and conspiracy theories every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back to Velvet Bite Radio. I'm your host, Melissa Dawn, and today's episode, it's not vampires. I reached back into my archives from a show I did called The Secret Door way back in 2020. I did an interview with author Aidan Wachter. He is a type of occultist, naturalist, author, and we talked about his book where he goes into practical magic and ancestral magic. I encourage you guys to listen, check it out, look up Aidan on Google and check out his books. He does tremendous work, which he's been doing for decades. And before you get into the episode, remember to subscribe, like, hit the bell, and go over to my Substack at melissadawnharris.substack.com. And of course, as always, everything is on the website at melissadawnharris.com. Let's get into this episode with Aidan Wachter. Okay, as I'm recording this, it is probably actually the eve of Halloween, but here we are. When you're listening to this, we're in November. And I want to start out by acknowledging Mercury's in retrograde, and that means that November is Magic Month. You're like, what? It is. Coincidence has lined it up this way. And this episode, I'm rubbing my hands together here, guys, is one I've been waiting to release. I recorded it a few months back with author and magical practitioner Aidan Wachter. Okay, so he has a book out called 6 Ways, which is linked very much to his practical approach to magic, his intuitive ways that he functions as an occult practitioner. Now, I don't know specifically what you, my listener, knows about magic. Perhaps you only know things from pop culture, like, 70s sort of satanic movies, or maybe you've seen some humorous tomes, or maybe you're familiar with history and witches, but perhaps you even practice magic yourself. Regardless of which way you're coming at this, you're going to get something out of Aidan's book, 6 Ways. And you're going to get something out of this interview. Now, of course, before I go on, I always like to do a little house cleaning and let everybody know. Of course, the news is we have a new co-host coming on. We're going to be recording her inaugural episode 2 soon. Oh boy, we're going to be recording that inaugural episode soon. And so probably I was going to do it by mid-November, but I might put it up there by middle of November. And we're going to be talking about her and her practices as a demon exorcist. If that's not fascinating, I don't know what is. We're also going to be doing some different topics about magical practices and spiritual experiences from her point of view, perspective, and her experiences in further episodes. And then we'll probably get into some fantastic Yule topics come December. But until then, it's going to be Magic Month here in November. So of course we have Aidan here today. We have Daniel Olexa for our next episode. He's talking about as well removal of spirits and demons, what we would call demons perhaps, that he might call a different name in his practice of psychotherapy. We're also going to have Walter Bosley on. He's talking about Esoteric Napoleon, his book. And I'm going to be doing a solo show all about one of my favorite magical practitioners that's local to Vancouver Island, Robin Skelton, a famous poet, author, lecturer at the University of Victoria, and of course, a magician and an exorcist. So you cannot not tune in for November because it's an exciting month full of magic and new stuff and new creations. And the Secret Door podcast is going in a new direction. All right, let's get to that show. The podcast is Aidan Wachter. We're talking about his book, The 6 Ways, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the show, Aidan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Well, it's great that you're here. I wanted to have more people on in concerns to talking about magic and different practices. And so this is a great way to start because your book is very, well, it's practical, but it seems intuitive to me more than anything.
That's certainly is to me. I'm not sure how well that translates to everybody else. I don't know.
Well, I that probably changes from person to person. But before we get into the book, maybe you can tell everybody what brought you to the practices of magic. How did you discover that magic was essential to humans?
I was pretty freaky as a kid. Not in any way that I kind of linked to magic initially. But I had a lot of sleep paralysis, a lot of kind of repeating kind of things I experienced as nightmares that kind of later on I figured were kind of visitations of some sort. Um, and Also just was like really dissatisfied with what I saw as kind of the options that were laid out. This was in the 70s when I was young. Um, and That led me into kind of a lot of drug experimentation and other things as well. And eventually, when I was about 15, I was a punk rocker, and I met some folks that were magicians, or at least had contact with that world, and that kind of led me to looking at magic as an alternative kind of approach to life.
Wow. So what, like, say in the 6 ways we get started here in this book, what is there an essential like framework and structure to your magic that
Um,
is like there like as a baseline for guidance?
yeah, I mean, I guess there is. There wasn't when I started, but where I've ended up now is kind of the best way to approach magic for me is using a form of animism, which is the kind of theory. Some folks it's religious, so it's a belief, but that essentially everything can be like sentient. Maybe not that every rock is an aware being, but that rocks could have indwelling spirits that you could interact with, or at least some of them. And I like the openness of that concept, as it produces kind of a world that's filled with potential allies for us.
Now, we were just talking there earlier, and you were talking about I find I've discussed before about night terrors and old hag sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about that as a visitation from a spirit. Is that how magic's practicing? Like I found that really fascinating that you viewed it that way.
Well, um, I'll kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent to get
Go
there,
right
but
ahead. Go right ahead.
um, if we look at most kind of and this is we're really talking folklore and anthropology and things like that, right? Most cultures up until the last, it will be really broad, we'll just say like 2,000 years, 3,000 years at the most, and really way closer to that, really within probably 500 years, um, believed that there was a lot of stuff around that was interacting with us, and that some of this was positive and a lot of it was negative. Um, and so, to me, yeah, you can have these experiences that are really freaky, and sometimes they are actually threatening,
Hmm.
um, which is more what we get, like, the fairies blinding people when they see them and things like that, which was apparently pretty commonplace, at least in the Celtic countries. Um, but more often, it's like, I think it's like trying to get attention, um, and trying to get you to interact, like, wake up enough that we could have some kind of interaction here. Uh, and I think in the kind of mechanistic worldview that we are in, kind of coupled with the kind of side effects of the Judeo-Christian world, where spirits
Right.
are kind of good and bad, and they're a very limited view there. I think
Right.
we get a lot of fear-based reactions to things that aren't necessarily actually threatening.
Because like when you look at someone like Carl Jung and that kind of psychology, they always talk about like our shadow selves, and a lot of people view that as terrifying, but like to confront that sort of element can also be liberating.
Right, and
Yeah.
and I think that's the I think that anybody that's kind of done heavy shadow work, you realize that you free up all this power, right? It's not like it's like, yeah, the process can really suck. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily fun, but when you do it and you get kind of a greater understanding of that side of yourself, you realize that there's kind of whole subsets of our personal power that we hide away because it's not. We don't believe that it's good or that it's healthy or that it's safe. We believe that that's the bad stuff that we should avoid.
Hmm. Fantastic. Now, when you're getting into magic, I'm going to assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the important thing is the basis would be your thoughts and feelings, like meditation and trance, like having a really that as a basis to when you're going to work.
I think that it certainly helps. There's a lot of folks who do magic quite effectively without either a trance or meditative background. Um, I never had much luck uh, consistently until I kind of got that stuff in order. Um, and for me, the trance part of it is because I'm not very visual. There's a lot of people who can visualize all sorts of things really easily, and I'm not one of them. Um, Kind of one of the sad experiences for all of my, wayward youth drug abuse things was I really didn't get to hallucinate much, though I tried really hard. Um, and and that plays out in the magical side too. So for me, trance is a way of like dropping into a space where I can have a more immersive experience with things that, for a lot of folks, they can do it pretty straightforward. They're actually more
I
prone
just
to seeing things.
Yeah, I just gathered that like if you can meditate to certain things, you're almost going to different realms and you're able to call forth different energies or spirits as you would.
Right. And then also with meditation, the big thing is that you begin to see what's the kind of your mind is doing all our minds are doing all sorts of stuff all the time. They're not really designed to shut up. Um, and so there's all this static basically. There's us worrying about what other people think of us, or us worrying about what we think about ourselves, or worrying about money, or worrying about the kids, or all these things that are kind of continuously churning.
Yeah, don't I know
Um,
it? Don't I
Yeah,
know
totally,
it?
right? It's super
Yeah.
obvious. And meditation is really how do you become aware that that's what's going on, so that you can kind of give it the amount of attention that it deserves or doesn't deserve, is
Right.
what I would say.
It's like
A
a
lot of people get,
self-awareness.
yeah, and so a lot of people get jammed up because they think you're supposed to go into this kind of vacuous, no mind state. And uh, that's not really what it is for most people. It's just kind of getting to the point where you go, well, so you could sit down and go, why am I so jacked up today? And be able to kind of look at the contents of your mind and go, oh, I'm worried about this, this, and this. Let's come up with a
Right.
strategy to actually address those things so that they aren't just churning in the background. Uh,
Because I'm sure a lot of people aren't even really, because it's so, it happens automatically. They're not even really aware of all the thoughts that are zooming through their heads. And I kind of and have always connected magic to almost like law of attraction, where your feelings and your thoughts come into form. And so I'm assuming that to me, it might to be aware of your thoughts have something to do with that. Like if you can be aware of it, you're going to be better at manifesting things.
Right. And I think, I have kind of the standard issues with the law of attraction, which is it's not that that concept is wrong, it's that it's usually put out in an overly simplistic way.
Exactly.
Um, you
Yeah,
know,
I agree.
and so, but it's clearly that there's some mechanism like that that is going on. And so magic in part, at least on the practical end, is figuring out
Hmm.
how does that work for you? and how that works for you might be pretty different than how it works for another person. But in general, yeah, if you can go, if I'm thinking constantly shitty thoughts about myself, how am I supposed to manifest really good things for myself? Because I'm
Mm.
sending out mixed messages.
Yeah, and I'm sure it doesn't work direct because you see there's a lot of crazy people out there who bullshit their no offense, but they're bullshitting their way through life, and you're like, how did they get all that? They're crazy.
But some of that is like, right, there is something about kind of single pointedness. um,
Yeah, it's
Whether
true.
good or bad, there's
Yeah.
really horrible people who've done amazing
One track mind.
things. Whether you're talking somebody like Genghis Khan or Adolf Hitler or
Yeet.
uh,
Yeah.
right, you can go to really extreme points and go, these people were probably not really what most of us would think of as being okay.
Yes.
Uh, and probably were running on some weird internal stuff.
Yeah. But
But they
honestly,
were extremely effective.
they were extremely effective, but when you look at it, if they had come, you know, 15 years earlier or 15 years later, it probably wouldn't have happened. So it's almost like all these things sort of coexist at the same time. It almost has to, right?
Right,
Like the things were happening in that time, and it's not just about them, it's about everything else, everybody else in that time. And they're not just in a bubble manifesting themselves, they're interacting with other things, right?
right. And I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, that's a great point. I mean, which is a lot of the stuff that goes on is, I think that kind of comes up in magic and where things like meditation and doing shadow work and getting kind of conscious of yourself is it. I think it also allows you to kind of see like what's viable right now. Uh, is it viable for me to try and take this giant step to where I want to be, or do I need to do more groundwork, or is that coming up as a possibility down the road? Right, all these things become easier to take a look at and kind of plot and get a little bit strategic about.
Become a podcast Patreon supporter at www.patreon.com/secret door podcast. There's $1, $3, $5, $10, and $20 reward levels. And remember, you can help us a lot for as little as $1 a month. Just go on to www.patreon.com/secret door podcast and check out all those reward levels and become a part of the Secret Door podcast team and help support our show. Now back to our interview with Aidan Wachter. So now you do jewelry making, I know that.
I
And
do.
you do. It's not just like for aesthetics. It's got a lot of intention and meaning to it.
Right.
And I'm going to tie this in with sigil magic because when I see people who make jewelry pieces as ritual, it reminds me of making a sigil as well.
Absolutely. And that's certainly my roots of it. Uh,
Hmm.
Sigil magic was the first form of magic I really dug into, and it's a huge influence on my thinking about magic. And then just over, from making talismanic work for whatever it is now, it's 35 years or something, using that approach. That's kind of how I call in the energies that end up as the talismans.
I also always like when I see a sigil and then I look at emblems and like a sort of like a seal of a family or a crest. It obviously they're very similar. It's almost like a power. Do you think that it gives you more if someone doesn't have a sigil or they do you think a sigil gives you more power?
I think it's just a great way of communicating with, my favorite writer on magic is wrote a book called Visual Magic. A guy named Jan Fries. And he talks about sigils as being kind of the one of the best ways of talking to your deep mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the deep mind is the part that isn't doing all of that constant chatter, that's not distracted. Um, and that's the part coming from his theory that actually allows us to kind of manifest things magically. Um, and so a sigil is a way of kind of coding a desire into a form that is meaningless to that part of your mind that just wants to chatter, but makes total sense to your deep mind. Uh, and so I think that that's part of the beauty of sigil magic to me is we keep kind of actually feeding information and requests to that part of ourselves that can often be kind of ignored. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it begins to get involved in the process more. So we begin to see what we could maybe do, or maybe what we really do want to do. There's maybe this, maybe we're tied up in kind of a sea of obligation thinking, right? There's all this stuff
Mm-hmm.
I have to do. Most of that's not real, right? There's social obligation, but that's not really real. That's not really a constraint on you in the sense like a physical constraint would be. And so
Right.
if we're playing with those sigils and throwing those down into the deep mind, I think it begins to go, hey, you don't have to do that. Wouldn't this be more cool? Wouldn't this suit us better? Uh,
Well, that deep mind, like I know for me, like say I'm like, oh God, I have to work all these days. I have this client, I have all these things, and there's that chatter of all the things you have to do. And perhaps that sort of surfacing chatter can't see the way. And does that deep mind have more of an access to the obvious way that you don't have to be so concerned with all of that?
I think so. And I think that the deep mind is concerned with, how do I describe this? So I think that we live in like a, a highly conscious universe, right? And I view it as kind of like a vast sea of organisms that together make up a larger organism, right?
Hmm.
And I think that magic then is how do we interact better on both sides of that? How do we get clear information from that, what I call the field, right? And
Hmm.
how do we feed back our kind of desires and what we would like to know or do into that system? And so totally, it totally works that way.
So but the deep mind is aware of the chatter of the sort of surface and the
Yeah.
concerns, and it's just about an even communication between them.
And I think it also knows what's kind of useless, right? It
Right.
understands that it understands that my friend Mark, I learned a jewelry from, his term for the kind of chatter, which I've always really liked, is the discursive mind, right? It's continuously cycling, and it's mostly nonsense. And the deep mind doesn't care about that. It cares about what are the serious realities within that. So I might be freaked out about what someone thinks about me, and I
Yeah.
think the deep mind doesn't care at all. It's like that's not important. They
Yes.
think what they think about you. You are what you are. They're unrelated things.
I've had that experience in terms of like I would hold on to relationships or partnerships or podcast partnership. I'd hold on to things because, I thought this is, you have to do this, you have to do this. And I think when I finally let them go, I was super concerned and like hyper like that chatter, but the deeper self of myself was like, it doesn't matter. You have to let this go or you're gonna die. It just doesn't matter. You'll find new things, new things. This was not a functioning thing for you. It was wearing you out. It wasn't healthy, or et cetera, et cetera. This person doesn't have healthy things for you. It's okay. They'll be fine. They'll go on.
Right. And I
That
think
kind of
that,
thing. It
and
was
I
way
think,
more calm.
yeah, and I think that there's a part of us as kind of human animals where we we're really sticky. Like ideas stick, people stick, energy sticks, um, and not all of it sticks equally. But part of again the thing that a lot of what I talk about in 6 ways is how do we go through a process of determining what of that stuff we are going to allow to stick, what are we
Hmm.
going to allow to hang around with. And it's not from like a Buddhist sense of we want to separate from all attachment because we're after this enlightened state. It's
Right.
just like that's just excess strain on the system. It's more static, it's more noise, it's more drag, right?
Yes.
And if we can shed as much of that drag that we can, that doesn't, just the stuff that doesn't matter. It's not like we need to be totally not concerned with anything, but we have to pick, right? Like, so you, for most of us, like the real deals are kind of like our health and our families, right?
Yes.
Our close friends. And if we can really kind of compartmentalize everything else, like this is stuff I also have to deal with just to get by, but I'm not going to allow my kind of discursive mind to rule me by making that seem as important as whether my kids are taken care of.
Exactly.
It just smooths everything out.
And that's fantastic. It's too bad most people couldn't get in touch with that as soon as possible in their life.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I certainly didn't. It was that was kind of the great mind blower for me playing in Magic is I entered pretty open minded, and the more that I got into it, the more open minded I became. So I
Yeah.
didn't end up boxed in, whether that be in a conception of a particular
Yeah.
school of magic or whatever. And what my experience was, yeah, it's like I keep freeing up this kind of internal space that allows me to see more and more what I would like to do and what I might like to be and who I really don't want to give any time to or thoughts that I don't want to give any time to.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are just I think at the core, one of the reasons they won't leave certain things is they're afraid to be alone or abandoned, or like their essential existence will be threatened if they give up certain ways of life.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that it's a funny thing. I talk about that with people sometimes as saying like that's a real thing in that it's something you're actually maybe going to experience,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily weighted the way that you think it is. It's like
Yes.
it's not that it's not important or that it doesn't matter, but maybe it doesn't matter nearly as much as you think it does. Uh, it's
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have that when they walk out of really kind of screwed up relationships, that
Yes.
there's material reasons why you should stay, and those seem insurmountable. And then when you're out the other side, you're like, oh my God, I have so much more headspace and emotional space and energy that I can
Yes.
totally resolve all those problems that seemed insurmountable. And I think that that's really common.
Yes. Absolutely. I know. Totally my experience. 100%. It's phenomenal how it's almost like a transformation. It's almost like burning up if people are just afraid to go there. It's really it can be really terrifying. And going through it, like going through a divorce or going through anything that's going to collapse, it's absolute chaos because you don't know where you're going to land sometimes. Because it's so
Right.
you're dealing sometimes you can't just leave a situation. You've got to deal with certain things and there's chaos and you can't always just get away with it like snap and sometimes you can.
Right. And I think that there's a lot of that that is like, I mean, it's and there's layers of it, so it's not, but like there's things that were more true in the past that aren't true now, right? So we can look at there's tons of cultures where you couldn't necessarily have left a marriage.
Yeah.
Um, there's tons of cultures where you couldn't necessarily have left your kind of tribal community, where there was just no allowance for those things. And I think we carry kind of these deep seated fears as if that's true.
But,
And then
well,
there's,
I
go
think
ahead.
I know, I was just gonna say, I think a lot of those structures, those marriages, they're formed for survival, right?
Right.
In those communities.
Absolutely. And and then we look at now where we've got kind of, I've not traveled a ton outside of the US, but at least in the US, we have this commodification of fear. Uh, and this is fear of being good enough, fear of never being okay on your own, fear of disease, fear of others, fear of everything, right? And it's just known to the marketing world that this is the way to sell, right? Whether
Yes.
this is selling politics or whether this is selling product. And so all of that stuff is fed in, and so it's I've known people that kind of had a similar take on mine, but they were kind of hostile about it because they were like, "Well, everybody should fucking see that, right? Um, it's clear." And you go,
It's
"Not really.
no,
If
it's
you're
not
if you're
really.
wired in a particular way, it's clear."
If you've been raised from cradle to death with marketing, what else what difference are you going to know?
Right. And like, so I know just from my own experience that it's not that I can't be marketed to, because I can be, but most of what goes on, I kind of look at and go, that's wrong. That's, or that
Yes.
makes me maybe want to look for some more information, but I'm not at all convinced. But again, that's personality wise. It's how my mind works anyway. And so I
Well,
kind of have a leg up on that process. So,
the one thing I will say is when I when I was born, and even when my mother was born, technology wasn't so evasive. You didn't have TV 24/7. So no kids being born today where they're bombarded, they I think a lot of times we remember that we think, "Oh, this is crap," or because we actually do have a memory of time where we were outside and there was hardly any TV, and we have that there in the background somewhere, where some children today may not have that as much. They're always seem to be with their cell phones, or they're always bombarded with technology in a way that we never were before. And I
right.
don't know if that interferes on well, I can go there, whether that interferes on talking to your deep mind or magic, but I think technology is playing a big part in today anyways, in that marketing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And
All right. Our guests support Secret Door Podcast by appearing on our show, and we support our guests. So if you like what you hear and you want to purchase one of our guest books, make sure to go in the show notes and click on those links and go and purchase their books. We will have a link to Aidan Wachter's 6 Ways book where you can go and purchase that easily. And we encourage everybody to support our guests on our show. It helps us grow. It helps them grow. All right, now back to that show.
Just how long have we been receiving these mysterious signals from outer space?
there's a guy that I was lucky enough to just run into once, Jerry Mander, who wrote a book in I want to say early '70s, but it could be mid '70s, um, called Four Arguments for the Elimination of Television. Um, and then he wrote a later book that is probably the more readable book now, that I want to say came out in the late '80s, called In the Absence of the Sacred, the failure of technology and the survival of, I can't remember what term he uses, but he's looking at native culture,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of cultures that are separated from that, and what they actually provided for their members as far as kind of understanding of the world within that culture, and how kind of the tale that technology has always said, which is we're going to make everything easier
Mm-hmm.
so you can have more free time and have a more beautiful life. And he was really looking at how much that was kind of a fail. It hadn't happened. Like,
No.
it just didn't work that way. And I came at this really sideways. There was a film by David Cronenberg that came out when I was in high school age called Videodrome that is about
Yep.
it's about what is it that Brian Oblivion says, that the images that appear on the television screen are received as raw data by the mind. The
Yes.
television is the retina of the mind's eye. And I think that that's really true of all of this screen stuff. And you have to be kind of savvy to go, even if I'm aware of the surface level of this is not necessarily relevant to me. It's having an effect.
Yes.
Uh, and we like to play that that's not true. But when it's constant bombardment, it's very insidious, I think.
But it's fair. It is, because if it wasn't, people wouldn't get so upset about the news. They're pointing a camera in one spot on the entire planet where lots of stuff's going on, and they choose to say, "Here's what's happening," and that's our world. Like, we act like it's bombing us. Like, so it's obviously true that we perceive it as it's like we're right there, and it gives us anxiety. It heightens our heart rate, and we perceive that as all of reality, instead of, okay, they're highlighting one little element over here, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff too in the world.
And they're doing it for a reason.
Yes.
And sometimes we have, Fox News or something like that, that it's clear what their agenda is. But there's functionally always an agenda, even if it's strictly to get you to watch, right?
Yes.
And to pay attention. And so, kind of the ability to see that. Yeah, I think about that a lot. I think about like you think about Dark Ages Europe, right? And
Right.
what just a hellish experience that must have been, and how kind of messed up everybody's knowledge of what went on, even compared to earlier times, was.
Hmm.
And you look at that and you go, well, simultaneously, look at what was going on in China, um, where there was
Yeah.
this incredible level of sophistication, uh, and they were not having that experience.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But and there was really no knowledge of the other even going on, right? Uh, Yeah, it's one of the things that my wife and I talk about a lot, which is this concept that because we're in this time that is viewed as being very apocalyptic, um, and end of the worldy, and this in a sense, and one of the things that we talk about is that it's always the end of the world somewhere, right?
Yes.
That cultures are dying, sections of the world are dying, in the sense of what they were before. If you look at the example really used to be um, what is now Iran and Iraq and all that stuff. That was all heavy forest, right? And we have written descriptions of this being this lush green zones, um, just like we have descriptions from the folks that first came from Europe to North America, talking about the sky being blotted out from flights of birds that went on for days.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, all of that is gone, but other things have taken their place. It's very interesting because yeah, you have to kind of choose, what are you going to focus on,
Yeah.
and are you going to focus on what you want to focus on, or do you want to focus on what somebody else wants you to focus on?
Yeah. Are you going to watch Fox and CNN all day, or are you going to go do something you want to do?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I agree. Now, I want to move on into something that I wanted to get your concept on the idea or the practice of candle magic. You
Uh
read
huh.
about that a little bit. How do you go about candle magic? Like, what's your perception behind it? Like, why? Where's the power? Why is it powerful? Why do people do it?
So I came into magic, and pretty early on, I came across Peter Carroll's work with Libernal and Psychonaut. And
Hmm.
I didn't really accept what he wrote, but I thought he was doing an interesting thing, which I thought he was looking at, why do these different magical practices work, right? And that's the piece that I took to heart from Chaos Magic. Uh, and I think that candle magic works because it's a transmutation. It's a transmutation of something that is a solid, or a really slow moving liquid, really, but in the wax, that we're turning something into nothing, right? More or less, as we perceive it. It's really turning into heat and gases and smoke and all of that stuff. Um, and I think that what happens is that when we kind of, the general concept is called dressing a candle, but which is really just about how do we impress our intentions into the candle.
Right.
Then when we burn that candle, we're changing the shape of this thing from one form into another. And I think it both I think it's a really good messaging to the deep mind. Like, here's
Hmm.
something that's important, and we're letting it go, right? We're stating it's important and that we want it, and we're letting it go. and we're letting it go to somewhere that we can't see. And I also think that it feeds the spirits. I think that they actually are able to feed on that released energy that occurs from the candles burning. And so I think it throws available kind of material into what I call the other world, uh, to be used towards that end.
So the power of letting it go is handing it over to the spirit world where they
Right.
actually do the work, right?
Right. And even if you just view that as being your deep mind interfaced with
Hmm.
the field, right? I
Right.
happen to be pretty, I fought it for a very long time and ended up solidly in the, yeah, the spirits are real and independent from us a lot of the time
Hmm.
camp,
Hmm.
but it's not necessary that you be there to have to do effective work. That's what makes sense to me at this point.
Right. I mean, a lot of people get caught up in colors of candles. Is that just to help them with their intentions? Is it necessary, or is that just and herbs and stuff? That's just something that helps people, or do they have properties that is important?
I think both. I do not use colored candles, and I haven't in about 15 years. I do use some materia, but I don't run some things like hoodoo and some forms of witchcraft are very, very kind of deeply based in herbs, and that's just not my approach. I definitely have seen it work, and I have used it to good effect, but it's not. How do I describe it? It's like it's kind of like that 80-20 rule that people talk about. It's not the major part for me of what makes it work.
Okay.
It could theoretically kick something up a notch, but I have not found that to be important enough compared to other aspects of how I do the work.
Right.
Um, it definitely can help focus someone. Um, I think a lot of those things uh, that, yeah, if you're like kind of going through the labor and work of sorting out the plant material or the resins or herbs or whatever and the color schemes that all kind of sync up to your the thing you're trying to achieve, it's a great way to focus the mind. Uh, but I'm not sure that it. I mean, to me at least, it's not a crucial point.
Well, you could sort of probably combine like sigils with candles. Like, there's no need to just have one. You could probably put a sigil on your candle and combine different magics, right? Like processes, right?
And I absolutely do that. That's one of my ways of working is that I tend to create sigils for kind of most of the major things that I'm working on.
Hmm.
And then if I feel like I need to send another push towards that thing, I'll do that exact thing. Is that I'll then carve that sigil into the candle and dress the candle the way that I do it, and then go from there.
Yeah, and a lot of people like to use like I've seen a list of preconceived sigils. Like, here's a sigil for this demon. Here's a sigil for this. Is that a good way to start out, or would you like do people make their own or come up with their own designs? Like I was always just like, oh, there's pre-made sigils. Is that like an alphabet or?
You know, most of that stuff comes from. I'm going to throw out the precursor that a lot of that stuff definitely works, but I'm not a fan for me and for most people of it because you're kind of choosing to tie yourself into a history of work
Yeah.
that may not really suit what you're after.
Right. It's
Um,
yeah, it could be instead of getting what you want, you'll tap into whatever energy is attached to that.
right, and then a lot of the times, a lot of the stuff that we see for spirit work have come from ceremonial magic, where traditionally there's a lot of compulsion involved there, which totally works. Um, but I don't like it. I'm
Mm.
really interested in working with people who are interested in working with me. Um, and I really don't want to. How do I say it? It's like if I want a dog to do my life with me, I want to pick that dog and raise that dog to my life.
Yeah.
I don't want the dog that maybe has been massively abused in ways I'm not going to know about until its trigger hits, right? And you
Right.
realize, oh, this dog is actually wired in a way that's counter to what I want to do. that's kind of my take on the using the kind of pre-made sigils, and especially working with kind of the goetic spirits and things like that.
Yeah.
It's I want everything as clean as possible, and I'm more interested in calling things in and saying, "This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Who wants to help?"
Yeah, I know that I was watching a lot of footage on like Alexandrian magic from like Alexander's and all that, and I was watching their process, and I just thought, you know, this seems just like a bunch of 70s sex hype, and they were like, it has to be pristine and it has to be this way. I'm like, I don't know if that feels right. It just seemed loaded with a lot of 70s sex, drugs culture and a lot of narcissism.
Well, I think it's also
That's my opinion, by the way, not
yeah,
Aidan's, everyone.
yeah. Well, but I think it's a useful thought, and I know I've known some Alexandrian witches who are really kick-ass. So, um, but I never was able to kind of bond into that kind of world of things, and part of it has to do with, I think that, and this goes back to something we were talking about earlier, which is that when we set up these kind of traditional traditions in magic, just like in anything else, um, they're control mechanisms.
Yeah,
And this is not saying that they're good or bad, but that's what the function is for, right?
right.
In a way, it's to codify what happens.
It's sort of
Um,
everybody has like a uniform behavior.
and everybody has a somewhat uniform experience, right? Everybody's
Yeah,
trained to, this is the God that you're going to meet here. This is the spirit you go to for this. And it's kind of cool. The very cool stuff comes out of that because you
yeah.
end up having a shared experience in language with a group of people. Um, I've always been really interested in like what happens outside of all of that.
Well, yeah.
Um,
I think that's what,
what's available? What are
yeah.
available options if we don't codify? What if we don't put ourselves or the processes in boxes?
I think that's what bothered me about it when I was like watching some of the old videos. I was like, well, I don't want to do something where some guy's telling me how to, lay down and kiss the feet and, do this. I'm like, oh, well, I don't even know if I like you. Well, why would I do that? Like and it did. I will say, and this is me. Alexander seemed very narcissistic in a way, and I was like, why would I lay down and do all this goddess ritual stuff to somebody I don't even know? In my opinion, he has to prove his worth to me and if I even like him.
Totally. Well, I
Yeah.
think and there's a lot of I think undeniably there's a in any time we move into kind of spiritual circles and group spiritual practices, there's the availability of a lot of unsavory behavior. Um, and that if we get to create our traditions, we get to sell that as a part of the tradition, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I've never really been down. I'm too much of a. I want everybody to do the thing that works the best for them.
Yeah.
And if that's what works for you, go do it. I don't care. I've got
Yeah.
no issues with it. But I certainly don't think that it's innately better than anything else.
I'm also highly when I look at organizations like that, I'm highly I don't want to say well, yes, suspicious is a good word, but I'm very cautious and careful analyzing things for cult-like behaviors and abuse, right? Because it happens.
Totally.
So that's the other part in me that's like, what's going on there?
Right. Well, and it's like I kind of came to magic as well. That a big kind of thing for me was the influence of the Temple of Psychic Eve, which is kind of a strange beast in its own. But the thing that I took from it was that it was kind of looking at kind of what now gets talked about as kind of decolonizing your mind, right? Which is ties into a lot of the other stuff we've talked about. How do you how do you know what you really want
There, I
um,
guess, yeah.
when you're filled with all of this stuff, right? And you've been told what you really want or should really want, and all of that. And so for me, yeah, I've been able to work loosely with groups of people for short periods of time, but I'm especially with magic, which is so personal to me, and it's about trying to have the life and experience of the world that you would like to have. I've always hit a point where it's like I'm not interested in um, uh, submitting any of it, what I'm after for what you're after.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think you should be for me. I think that we could even work together and not do that, right? But there's
Yeah.
places where we should just not work together.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like to me things should be okay. Let's do stuff if and when it happens, it happens, and but there's no like rules that say you have to attend and you have to be there, and if you're not, we're going to shun you and do all these horrible things, and if you don't follow all this, that's it, we're coming after you. Right, and
Oh
that's to
yeah,
me like
totally.
there like and there's some places where it's like, oh, if there's these rules and if you don't follow a thing, or you tell somebody something, they're like, that's it, we're striking you from the group and you're being shunned, and there's groups like that. But
And I think it's
there,
funny.
yeah.
It's just control stuff, and it's to me, magic is about how do you step outside of external controls
Mhm.
and throw your energy into kind of personal control.
Yeah, and it goes right back to what we were saying about being afraid to be alone.
Right.
Totally does. It's like
Yeah.
tribal thing. It's that tribal thing, but it's not a like a Alexandrian magic or a cult thing. It's not a tribe you need for survival necessarily.
Right. And I do think it's interesting. I started looking at magical stuff um, kind of seriously in '82, and so at that time there was a very limited amount of information comparatively, right? And so there were a lot of folks who joined particular traditions or particular schools or particular orders because that was the only place that they could find people to play with. Um, and that makes total sense, right? But I think now we're at a really cool point where you can either find the nichiest group that you could ever want for really precisely whatever it is that you want to do. Or you could really just choose to kind of what is to me a more normal thing and have friends amongst all that stuff, and maybe you get together and do stuff. Or I have friends that are heathens, and I've got friends who are involved in African traditional religions, and we do work together. We do it
Mhm.
independently, and we don't tend to try and do the same work. But
Yeah,
somebody
that's
says my business is not going where I need it to go. Could I get some help? Or I've got a sick aunt or whatever, and we all kind of know and trust each other, that we have faith in what's going on and go, yeah, what are you looking for? What kind of outcome is she looking for? And then we all do our work our own way to help that.
that's great because it feels like just like a natural friendship, more like having game nights where you're almost like you're doing magic, but you're doing it like it's just natural. Everyone's like, "Oh, we like each other. This is a natural attraction come together group." And, "Oh, we have different ways of doing things, and here it is. We'll help each other out because we respect each other."
Totally. And I think that that's a big part of what I was trying to put forward in Six Ways, right? Is that idea of like, this is normal. We've been doing this since we were probably not speaking very many words. It's in us. And to try and kind of codify all of the little pieces into different clicks and rules and stuff doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, no, it's in all of us, and we have to figure out the way that it works best. Otherwise, you end up with like the entire orchestra of violin, right?
So that was the end of the public interview. Now I am going to include the Patreon episode that was with Aidan that will follow this. So hopefully it's not too choppy and it makes sense. But here's part 2, the Patreon episode of that interview with Aidan Wachter.
What I was really thinking about is we've hit all these points where the rules change and where it becomes really important to some part of society that you adhere to their set of things, right? And so we had this happen, as I said, in the Protestant Revolution or Reformation. We've had this in varieties of kind of large scale religious schisms. And then this kicked up in kind of that shift into a very materialist view, um, which leads then into kind of where we are now in the US, which is in this very material goods, capitalism over all thing. And it's not even saying that capitalism or having material goods are bad things, right? But it's a really limited viewpoint. And it really narrows the possibilities of what a life could look like.
And it's a lot of it is unnecessary manufacturing. Like a lot of it goes into junk and waste. It's not like we're like, okay, goods and material stuff is wealth, but we're not making things that last for somebody's lifetime and gets handed down and has this sort of value. A lot of it's junk from the dollar store that nobody really needs.
Right, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So now I wanted to get into the ancestors. So we talked about the deep mind and different spirit works, trance, sigil, but how do the ancestors, ancestral magic, and calling them forth, are they living? Are our ancestors there in some worlds speaking to us daily, like, and we can use them and have access to them?
I'm kind of I'm fairly new to the ancestor work in the grander scheme of what I've been doing.
Okay.
I really got into it about 5 or 6 years ago. And for me, what happened is I was working with Bree Saucy, who's a really excellent teacher, and she has a really cool book out right now called Making Magic that I recommend pretty highly. And part of the thing that happened is we were going to go into this is trance work stuff, and we we're going into a space where we would meet our ancestors, right? And I'd never done this, and I thought it would be kind of cool to see how it went. And the experience for me was uh, I entered into this space, the ancestors all came forward, I could see some of my grandparents and great grandparents who I knew, and they kind of like got a little bit hazier in my experience. And this one guy that was kind of in the back, presented as a guy, I try and always keep in mind that what we see is not necessarily what is. So this entity that presented as a man and was dressed in maybe 17th century kind of peasanty clothes, nothing fancy. He kind of headed through this crowd of ancestors, and they parted for him. And he like walked up to me and said, "That's not what you're doing right now, because we need to talk. And we've been waiting to talk to you." And his story, as I interpreted it, was that he was a particular part of my ancestral chain that were magical practitioners, and that they had particular interests in what I was doing now. And so I work with them. And then I do have an ancestor shrine that I mostly make offerings for and give kind of thanks to them for being supportive of me, and ask them to stay out of my way because they're almost all not into magic.
Ah.
And so I have a relationship with them to keep them from interfering.
That's interesting. That's very bizarre. I would have never. Well, I guess they're just normal people in this world.
Yeah,
So that
and so
doesn't
they're
necessarily mean they practiced.
yeah, and so they're pretty supportive now, but occasionally I'll hit little glitches of things, and I'll have to kind of sit down with them and go, "This is what I'm doing. I know it probably seems weird, but this is what I'm trying to do, and this is the intention behind it." And then they're totally on board, and they do help out now. But it took a couple of years before they were like interested in really helping out. Whereas this other side, which I called the deep line ancestors, they're 100% on board. They're like, no, 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 they just don't get it. This is what we've always done, and this is what you're doing, and we're here to assist. And so those guys, that crew, that I only really deal with there's two different kind of spirits that I interact with. That first one that I met and another one, they're hugely beneficial. So how it works is very different for different people, I think. But it's a very real influence, I think, that should be addressed probably by most people that practice.
Fascinating. I always had this little. I guess I always use the word woo woo. I guess it's just for lack of better word. But I had this idea that they're all waiting and they're all enlightened and they're all there and it's like a near death experience. So and then when you're saying that, I'm like, oh, okay, so they can be just as pain in the butt in the afterlife as maybe some of them are when you're dealing with them.
My friend Sam, her mom She's one of the first practitioners that I met, and the first person I met who self-identified as a witch. And when I met her mother told me something that I will never forget. When I was asking her about the dead and spiritualism and things like that, she said, "Yeah, people can get really messed up there. Just because they're dead, it doesn't mean they're smart."
Oh, that's great. You're like,
But
you know what? Were they smart when they were alive? Because if they weren't, you might want to
and there is something,
reconsider.
and I think there is something that happens. It's, again, this is not kind of my main thrust, but there's something that happens to that. To those spirits over time, and I think that working with them seems like it improves it. So, like, again, like the ones that I had that were like, "Hell no, you're crazy," are way more on board. And so I think it is, there's a benefit to doing the kind of offering work to them and asking them to kind of assist and watch out for you, in that there's some kind of I think the term that gets used is elevated ancestors in some traditions, and that elevation does seem to occur, and it definitely does. It helps things out.
Yeah. Well, there would definitely be certain ancestors that I would call over others for sure. Absolutely.
Oh
What?
yeah,
Some
no.
I would never even. I'd be like, nope, sorry, don't want to talk.
Oh no, we have some, we have like the sexually abusive ancestors in one part of my line. It's like, not welcome.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
never even considered that. That's yeah, I'm gonna be thinking about that all day now. I'd be like, damn. I'm like, I better stop just calling on general ancestors.
But I think too, it's like that idea. It was very interesting, and it's something that I've thought about and kind of worked with those kind of deep line ancestors, is taking that concept of that you could also go in intentionally and not necessarily be thinking about your grandparents or the folks that you knew, but going in and making offerings to the ancestors who are interested specifically in what you're doing in your life and
Right.
are helpful to you, because we got millions of them, right? Um,
We do.
so somebody's probably on board, and they do seem like they're very good at getting stuff done in the material world.
Interesting. Now, I wanted to ask you about dirt sorcery. I've never heard of this before. And I was like, I'm like, what? I'm gonna let you tell me about it just quickly. I mean, it's in the book.
Yeah,
You guys can go in it,
totally.
but what is dirt sorcery?
So the first group that I actually joined up with so that I could hang around with magicians and kind of see what they did and learn was the OTO, which is, for those that don't know, it's a ceremonial magic based, uh, mostly religious organization, I would say, kind of based on the kind of Masonic structure, um, that came around in its current form through Aleister Crowley. And so the background of that is kind of Golden Dawn ceremonial magic, which is lots of correspondences. These colors are this, it's tied into Kabbalah,
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff. And I just didn't gel. It's like, it was really not my thing. And so people would ask me about kind of particular ceremonial practices that were common in that group and things. And I eventually started saying, I'm more of a rocks and string kind of guy, because that's how I worked. I would go out and find a tree or something and ask it if I could have a piece of it, or I'd find a branch and ask it if it would like to work with me in magic. And then I would find feathers, or I would find other things, and I would kind of create what I now think of as these talismans. And that eventually I began calling dirt sorcery as a joke. And so that's what dirt sorcery is it's about kind of working with what's at hand and not being afraid of the material world and afraid of the kind of body and afraid of the just general grunginess of it is of down here, that we're not trying to transcend this world necessarily. We're trying to have a good experience in it.
And so it would imply that you don't need to have brand new and everything looking a certain way, you can be very resourceful as well and just use some prime materials that are almost raw materials. Nothing has to be polished and fancy.
Right, and that's mostly how I work. I mean, I do work a lot with dirt, actual soil. Uh, so kind of there's a common practice of road opening in magic, which is about kind of clearing obstructions that are in our way and opening the paths that we might travel down,
Mm-hmm.
so we could get what we want. And to do that, I go out and find. Luckily, I live in a neighborhood that's mostly dirt roads, so I will go and wander until I find a spot that feels like it wants to help and ask it if it wants to help, and I'll make offerings to it and collect some of that dirt and bring that back to use in kind of the magical work or spell work that I do. And I find that very effective.
That's fascinating. Now, to end tied up, the one thing I want to talk about at the end, and I'm not sure in what depth you cover in the book, but people have this idea of like a threefold law. A lot of Wiccans probably have that idea, and so they're really against sort of what they would call a dark magic or a hexing. What is a dark magic and a hexing? Because it would appear to me like, okay, you could do some kind of hex, or I don't know if that's just in hoodoo and voodoo, but can you really have an effect on somebody's life and make stuff go bad for them just because, uh, wouldn't they have some sort of say in defense? Like how would that even work? And does that happen when you send bad stuff out? Does it come flying back at you?
um,
Had to ask it.
that's a fun one.
It is.
I would say that yes, you absolutely can do what I think of as kind of malefic magic, magic with malicious intent, right? Um, and it can fuck some people up. Some people definitely have stronger defenses against it. A lot of different kind of magical approaches and practices. Some of the stuff that is in 6 ways, though it's not specifically directed to that, works to counter that stuff.
Yes.
And you don't have to be a magical practitioner to do that. So people do this to each other all the time, I think. And so this is kind of where the concept of spiritual cleansing and things comes from, is just knowing that it's a messy world and people are messy, and you're likely
Well,
to get slimed at times, more or
I
less.
mean, spoken word, and words are magic. And if you're out smear campaigning or doing passive aggressive stuff to people, you're essentially putting bad mojo on them, so to speak. Like
Right.
I've had that as an experience with an ex-partner where that's what he would do, was go everywhere and sow seeds of lies and really bad stuff that weren't true. But what I found was it would only work on really weak, insecure people who really knew me didn't fall for it. So it just, and you would think, God, if there was a threefold law, that would have came right back at him and he'd be doing awful. And I'm like, well, it's just not the case. He does really well. He's really good at, convincing people of things. So I'm just like, whenever people would tell me there's a threefold law, it comes back to you. I'm like, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think my take is that there's a gross misunderstanding of the concept of karma coming from the East into the West.
Yeah.
And this is where I think these ideas come from. And karma, and you can find people that will fight about this forever, but if they were to dive into Buddhist texts, so I am not versed enough in Hinduism to be able to talk to it from that side, but if they would dive into the Buddhist texts seriously and not the New Age Buddhist texts, they would see that this is actually true, that they will fight about it forever, and they do. So I don't usually talk about it, but karma is cause and effect.
Yeah.
Literally. And what the Buddhists are saying is that everything arises out of causes and conditions, right?
Right.
That nothing happens purely independently, right? And so somehow that idea got turned into the idea of, if you do a bad thing, you're going to get your ass kicked for it. And that's not really what they're saying. They're saying that will have effects on you. There's no way for it not to. you've created a cause, you've created a condition
Mm-hmm.
by your kind of ill actions, right? They're not saying that you're going to get punished in like, right? They're not saying that thing's going to slap back on you. So what I tend to say is that ends tend to reflect the means. And so if you get what you get in life by fucking people over, you probably won't have as good of a life as you could have had
Right.
because the means are going to carry that within them. This doesn't mean that maybe you're going to be rich and happy and healthy, maybe, but I don't know that it's worth playing there. And a lot of that has to do with what we were talking about earlier about mind, right? And what do you hold in your mind? And so if you're kind of always looking for a way to screw somebody over, your mind is pointed in a really strange direction to me. I don't like having my mind running down kind of paranoid roads, right?
Yeah, where everybody's after you, or you have to go
Right,
get them, or you have to control everything.
exactly. And so for me, it works much better to kind of focus on what do I want for me? And
Mm-hmm.
let kind of the deep mind and the field and the allies and the spirits sort out how that happens. Because to me, that's really what magic is about, is we're saying there's things that I want to happen and I can't necessarily see the best way to make it happen.
Right.
And so I'm going to involve these other things, whether that's the deep mind or external or internal energies or external spirits, whatever. I'm going to involve these other ways to generate possibilities that I can't see. So that maybe I have the best possibility of having it come through. It's kind of it's kind of like if we think of this stream of ancestors, and let's just say that you have 1,000 ancestors that have an interest in you, right?
Right.
You may want something and you really can't see a way to do it, but if you can hand that off to that field of allies, that's a lot of different experiences and different approaches and different perceptions that could theoretically feed you back something. And this is often how that kind of stuff works in my experiences. You'll be totally stuck. You see one way out and you don't see how you can get there, right? And you
Right.
do your magical workings, and maybe you have to do them multiple times. And then somehow in the next, period of time, which is super variable, we don't get to control that stuff. Um, you realize that you see all these different ways out, different options occur. Um, different possibilities open up. The roads open, and to me, that's the amazing thing there. So yeah, I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but the hexing thing is not my world because it doesn't make sense for me to focus there.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think
it's
I
kind of
think
like there's almost nobody that I would actually walk up to and punch,
yeah, exactly.
right? So why would I do something that to me is more invasive to me
I
than that?
I think people have this idea of like getting justice or evening out something between someone where they feel they've been massively done wrong or they're being attacked. And so they don't necessarily understand that. Okay, just focus on what you want. They're so like they have that idea of justice and things being right, the wrongs being righted. And that's probably not necessarily
It,
how it should work or in their best interest.
well, and I also think that like if we have this idea that we're in an incredibly complex scenario, right? And that the social scenario is a seemingly immense one or aspect of it, and it really only is if we give it that power, right?
Yeah.
That's where it becomes really interesting. Like, do people get wronged? Absolutely. People do heinous things to each other. It would be really cool if those people just got taken out, kind of, automatically by the universe. But that really does not seem to be how it works.
No.
Um, and I think that it's kind of it's a strange form of kind of wishful thinking to me. It's like I don't know that I believe in that concept of justice. We're pretty horrible as a species when it comes to dealing with each other. And I look at it. Uh, I was talking to somebody the other day about there's all this current dialogue about immigration, right? And I was saying how interesting it is if you really kind of take that apart, right? Because all of my people were European,
Mm-hmm.
at least, up to a few hundred years ago. But, so I have people that came over on that same batch of ships as the Mayflower, right? So
Right.
that's kind of throws me into the, ancestrally pretty involved in kind of wide scale genocide. Um, there's another side of the family that came over in the early parts of the last century. Which section would give me a right to not view myself as an immigrant? Which section would give me just cause to be here, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, we're too far away from that.
Yeah.
And it's, we have to instead figure out, what do we want here? What do all of us want here? And how do you do that? Because most of what we want is probably pretty damn close.
I agree, and it's like reparations. It's like, you can't focus on something someone did 150 years ago and say, well, you now here who never did that, I want you to pay back, regardless of who you are. Where does it end? It would never end.
Exactly.
I'm like, I didn't even do anything, and then you end up like almost reversing it, where people are slaving to pay back something, and yeah, it's I don't think it's a situation anybody really wants. I think everybody just wants everybody to have a happy life.
Yeah, totally. The Helicopters have a song called "Hurtin' Time" that goes, "My eye for your eye, my tooth for your tooth, leaves the whole world blind with no teeth, and baby, that's the hurtin' truth."
Exactly. Well, I think it's actually a really good place to wrap it up. The Helicopter song. All right, where can people find you, Aidan, online?
AidanWachter.com is my website that has my blog and jewelry and links to everything else. And generally, if you do a search for Aidan Wachter, you find all of it. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and my book 6 Ways is available through online retailers pretty much only. But AidanWachter.com will get you to all of it.
All right, folks, that was the end of the interview with Aidan Wachter. Please check out his website, look at his books, fascinating individual, and of course, remember to subscribe, thumbs up, like, put this on your watch list or a playlist on YouTube, and of course, subscribe to the Substack, melissadonharris.substack.com, and everything is at the website, melissadonharris.com. We will see you next week, and in October, we have a wonderful lineup of guests, and I will post that announcement under the posts on the YouTube page. Cheers, guys.